here for the next episode of our Friday weekly podcast, the Class Action Weekly Wire. I'm Jennifer Riley, partner at Duane Morris, and joining me today is special counsel Brandon Spurlock. Thank you for being on the podcast today, Brandon.
Thanks, Jen. Very happy to be here.
So today on the podcast, we are discussing a recent ruling by the Seventh Circuit in a wage and hour lawsuit brought in Illinois. It's called Meadows versus NCR Corporation. Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the statute that the plaintiff invoked in this case to set the stage for our discussion of the ruling?
Well, the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, is a federal regulation enacted by the U.S. Department of Labor. It establishes minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, youth employment standards affecting employees in both the private sector and in federal, state, and local governments.
Thank you for that background. And now, can you tell us a little bit about the plaintiff's allegations in the NCR case?
Absolutely. At issue in this case is the FLSA's overtime regulation. This case was filed by a field technician of the defendant NCR, which is a company that makes ATM machines. The plaintiff asserted that NCR failed to pay overtime compensation. The plaintiff contended that NCR was routinely extorting field technicians' wages by allegedly refusing to pay them overtime for hours they worked in place of breaks or before or after their shifts ended. The plaintiff claimed he performed mainly quote-unquote incidental work before and after his work shifts and during his meal breaks, for which he was not paid, including things like responding to emails and phone calls, stocking his work van with required materials for his job each day, and mapping out his work travels. NCR argued that it agreed to pay workers for unauthorized overtime so long as the hours were properly recorded using the company's system.
So this is an interesting case, among other reasons, because it proceeded to trial. Brandon, can you tell our listeners a bit about what the jury concluded at the trial?
Yes, indeed. The case did go to trial, and the jury returned a verdict for the plaintiff. The court approved the verdict and awarded the plaintiff approximately $225,000 in back overtime pay, plus interest and attorney's fees. NCR, however, requested a new trial. The trial court denied that motion, but on appeal, the Seventh Circuit vacated the jury's verdict and remanded the action.
So the Seventh Circuit disagreed with the jury's findings. How did the court come to that conclusion?
Good question. So the Seventh Circuit determined that the district court had erred in allowing the plaintiff to claim he was owed payment for hours he had worked, but that he had not recorded. The Seventh Circuit stated that under the FLSA, employees can only expect to be paid for incidental activity if two conditions are met. One, the employer elected to pay for such activities by contract, custom, or practice. And two, the employee engaging in such activities complied with all the requirements imposed by that contract, custom, or practice. So here, the Seventh Circuit concluded that the plaintiff had not met that second condition. The Seventh Circuit then vacated the jury's verdict and sent the case back to the district court for further proceedings on whether the plaintiff should get a new trial.
So it will be interesting to see here what the future holds for this case. We will be sure to keep our listeners up to date on new developments. Brandon, thanks so much for joining me today and for giving our listeners the rundown on this ongoing dispute. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Thank you, listeners.